You rolling? Okay, good evening, everyone. It's so great to see all of you here from the community and from the college. So many students here just for the joy of learning. I am Joshua Shanes. I'm Associate Director of the Yasser Ireland Program of Jewish Studies and Director of the Ireland Center for Israel Studies. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to our three-rabbi panel. Before we begin, I have a few announcements, as we always do. First and foremost, a couple upcoming programs that you should know about. First of all, on Tuesday, February 28th at 4 p.m. afternoon, online only, West Point professor David Frey will discuss why Putin's armed forces are prone to the commission of such crimes and how atrocity become the Russian way of war. The Center for Holocaust Studies has had quite a few programs dealing with the war in Ukraine. This is the next one in the series, and I strongly encourage everyone to attend virtually. On March 14th at 7 p.m. in this room, Professor Leora Halperin, as a well-known professor of Israel Studies at the University of Washington, will be discussing the practice and politics of Zionist memory in and around the private Jewish agricultural colonies known as Moshavot that were established in late 19th century Ottoman Palestine. This is based on her last book. This is again March 14th in this room at 7 p.m. And finally, and this is a very big deal, the Arnold Nemerov lecture series is presenting The Holocaust by Bullets and its contemporary implications with Father Patrick Dubois. That's on March 22nd at 6 p.m., but not here. It's far too big an event for this room. It'll be at Rita 101. It's a block away down Glebe Street, the other end of Glebe Street, the new building, Glebe 101. That is not going to be broadcast online. You have to come to campus for that event. I cannot encourage you strongly enough to attend that event. I was just telling some people before we began that I heard Father Dubois for the first time a year ago at a conference in Arizona. I have been studying the Holocaust myself for some 30 plus years. Over time, believe it or not, you can become jaded and coarsened. Hearing him speak about the work he does, uncovering sites of genocide and talking to people who witnessed it, affected me more strongly, more profoundly than anything I've read or seen in many years. So I really encourage you all to attend that event. It's very, very special that we have him coming here. He'll be speaking, again, March 22nd at 6 p.m. He's an internationally renowned voice for human rights and genocide research and remembrance and so on. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to recognize two people. First, the Three Rabbi panel and many other Jewish studies community programs like it are made possible by the Karish Family Fund, endowed several years ago now by the Karish family. Charlotte and late Stanley had a deep passion for and dedication to this community. Those traits are worth admiring and celebrating, and we do so when gathering as a community for this panel. Please join me, as we always do, in thanking the Karish family with a round of applause. And secondly, and this is new, many of you knew Marty Perlmutter, really the builder of this program for many, many years, who brought me and all of us here basically to it, who passed away quite recently. It was really remarkable at his funeral service how many different speakers from his family and beyond talked about this event, the Three Rabbi panel. And the reason for that is because Marty, whom I had the pleasure of working with for many years, was absolutely dedicated to building a big tent of pluralistic Jewish community. And it was really his life's mission to be a place that different people of different religious feelings and approaches can be together and talk to each other and eat together and so on. And I would be remiss, I think, not to say something at this time, just to remember him and this event and everything that he built here, which is absolutely spectacular what he's made here now and during his lifetime. And finally, and more boringly, is that a word? Please check your phones and make sure they are on silent, as I will do to demonstrate. Putting in my code. No, that's not it. And checking that the sound is off. Now, you see, that's why we check. Now just a quick word of introduction for those in the audience less familiar with modern Jewish movements. In the 19th century, in the US and Western Europe, Jews for the first time became equal citizens of their countries while being exposed to ideas and values of the Enlightenment. Modern Judaisms were born from this mix. Competing Jewish denominations emerged, each of which attempted to negotiate the relationship of Jewishness and modernity in its own way, each claiming that they follow the best or most authentic traditions of Judaism from its earlier centuries. The first denomination to organize was Reform, born right here a few blocks away in Charleston and also in Germany, based on the idea that the Bible and subsequent Jewish laws and traditions, as man-made if divinely inspired, were subject to change and adaptation based on contemporary moral ideals. They tended to emphasize prophetic traditions of social justice over Talmudic codes of ritual conduct. Rabbi Alexander of KKBE represents this Reform tradition tonight. Orthodox Judaism was organized in reaction as a rallying of forces opposed to these ideas and committed to Jewish law as interpreted in the seminal legal code, the Shulchan Aruch. Modern Orthodoxy, represented here by Rabbi Mimran on my left of Congregation Dor Tikvah, celebrates secular education and integration into the modern world, even as it insists on a strict approach to ritual observance. Conservative Judaism came last, agreeing with Reform in part, but feeling that they had pulled too far away from Jewish tradition and insisting that Jewish law remained obligatory, but that the Orthodox were too rigid in their interpretation of it. Rabbi Ravsky of Synagogue Emanu-El represents this conservative tradition on our panel. Our topic tonight is Universalism and Particularism in Judaism. Judaism famously includes both humanist values, for example, that all humans are made in God's image, B'Tselem Elohim, as well as particularist claims that Jews constitute the chosen people or God's children, and so on. This semester, this panel, rabbis will discuss how their denominations balance these views in the 21st century. And our new format, we like to have a kind of a somewhat free-flowing conversation. I will try to balance everyone's time, but I think we'll open with a couple minutes about a general approach of your denomination towards the issues of particularism and universalism, and the question, if you wish, of chosenness. Why don't we go, please? Rabbi Alexander was ill last time, so I think in honor of her being well, thank God, she will begin.
Okay. And I did miss being with you all last time very much, not just because I was really ill, but we're thrilled to be with you tonight. So the question of particularism versus universalism, if I can set them up as being in conflict with one another at times, is really at the heart of the birth of Reform Judaism and maintains in what we know of as classical Reform Judaism, the Judaism that was born in the 19th century and has stayed fairly similar to what it was up until today, which does not describe KKBE, by the way, or mainstream Reform Judaism. But when Reform Judaism was born, as we heard from Dr. James, the world was opening up to Jews in a way that it had never been before. And the hopefulness of being able to enter society as a Jew, but not only as a Jew, was incredibly exciting to those who embraced Reform Judaism. And any Jewish particularism that would keep them from being able to seize these new opportunities that were in front of them, they were willing to jettison in order to be able to partake in what they hoped was not just a universal moment, but a universal, almost, a coming of universal peace that felt like it was right around the corner. If we could all be together and humanity could be one, isn't that what we've been praying for all along? And why would I allow my kashrut, or maybe even my Jewish calendar, or my Jewish dress to interfere with all of these new opportunities that were available to me? So let's jettison those Jewish particulars and embrace everything that was available to us universally. And you see that in our earliest platform, Pittsburgh 1885, and then the Columbus platform in the 1940s, reiterated until the Holocaust happens, and the state of Israel is established, and the Six-Day War happens in '67. And then you get to a statement of principles that was written in 1976, the first one after those new realities, when suddenly the optimism of the Enlightenment, emancipation, hadn't panned out, and there was a corrective put in that literally says we went too far in valuing universalism over particularism. So actually, I hope it's okay. I wanted to read to you because it's literally right there in the text. So this is, again, 1976 in what was called the Centenary Perspective. Early Reform Jews, newly admitted to general society and seeing in this the evidence of a growing universalism, regularly spoke of Jewish purpose in terms of Jewry service to humanity. In In recent years, we have become freshly conscious of the virtues of pluralism and the values of particularism. The Jewish people, in its unique way of life, validates its own worth while working toward the fulfillment of its messianic expectations. Until the recent past, our obligations to the Jewish people and to all humanity seemed congruent. At times now, these two imperatives appear to conflict. We know of no simple way to resolve such tensions. We must, however, confront them without abandoning either of our commitments. A universal concern for humanity, unaccompanied by a devotion to our particular people, is self-destructive. A passion for our people without involvement in humankind contradicts what the prophets have meant to us. Judaism calls us simultaneously to universal and particular obligations. So we come to this place of balance, which I think is where we still are today. We can talk a little bit more about how we balance and where, if we can't exactly balance, where do we put the emphasis between the two, but it gives you a sense of the evolution within our movement.
Thank you. Rabbi Ravsky, please.
See, often they say the conservative movement is chasing after the reform movement. This is one place where we got there before you guys, so it was a good thing. Within the conservative movement, certainly we did, when, as Josh said, when the movements were forming, we put particularism in a weightier category. And I think that the conservative movement has continued to try to hold those two things in balance. Now, those things are in a different balance than either of my colleagues' denominations here, but I think that's true across denominations, across religions, right? Is that we're always trying to find that way to keep one foot in the universal world, in the secular world, and one foot in the religious world. Are there sects that don't do that are all one way or all the other? Absolutely. But what I find beautiful about the conservative movement is the way that we navigate that, right? With the evolution of our understanding of halakha, of Jewish law, of being able to go back and revisit what is the universal value and what is the particular value, and how do those interplay with each other in ancient times, right? Classically, when those mitzvot were in the Torah throughout Jewish history, and how do we understand it now in the context of society in modern times? I am if I had to put myself in a camp, I like being a particularist. I like the details. Since Josh suggested this topic, the thought that's been in my head has been going back to one of my rabbinical school interviews. When I was looking at rabbinical schools, I was looking at the conservative movement ones. I also had the opportunity to interview at Hebrew College. And it just so happened that at the time I was in Israel, and Arthur Green, who was working at Hebrew College, was giving a speech, and he happened to be there, and I was able to interview with him. Now, if you don't know Arthur Green, you can look him up, you can Google him. He is a universalist on to the extreme, right? To him, everything is universal, and nothing is particular. And I got into a similar conversation as this panel with him, and it was the only rabbinical school interview that I walked away from saying, if I get into that rabbinical school alone, I won't go to rabbinical school. Because it was that there was nothing special about the Jewish people, and that it was all universal, and every value could be seen through the lens of any particular religion, and it bugged me. Right? It bugged me to say, how could you be the leader of a religious community, of any religious community, not just a Jewish community, but any religious community, and not say that there's something particular about your religion and your denomination that is unique, that brings you closer to God in a specific or different way, and that it's all just universal, because then what's the point? And so I found myself very much in that conservative movement camp of, we need this idea of particularism. We need to give it weight, equal weight to the universal morals and ethics that can be found in Judaism as well. but that particularism helps shape our identity, helps us acknowledge what it means to be the chosen people in the way that we look at the world in a particular chosen way. That's where I'll stop.
Thank you. Rabbi, please.
Okay, so for us, it's probably, I'll probably speak the least tonight, because when it comes to things like particularism and generalism, universalism, our focus is always first on ourselves and how do we kind of improve ourselves spiritually, to the extent where very often we don't even view these as ever being a contradiction, where if you're doing the right thing for yourself, be that keeping the part of the Torah that's between a person and God, keeping the other part of the Torah which is between a person and another person, inevitably you'll be bettering the world, because if you're not bettering the world, you're not doing it right. So ultimately for us, the way it works is, first and foremost, we focus on kind of you can call it the particularism, the individualism of ourselves, which would be looking inside the Torah, looking at the commandments, looking at the way it was given to us by God, and figuring out, what am I supposed to do in this moment? And by extension, that would mean that we develop and be a better force for the greater world. Now, this, both applies to looking at things on a macro scale and a micro scale, which means that when a person is deciding what to do, which which mitzvot they want to keep, and for us it's always the more the better. They look at it and they look inside. Dr. Shane's mentioned the Orthodox movement is very rooted inside of I'll call it text, but it's even more so the code of Jewish law. We follow the halachot, the details, and for us they really do matter. Which I think, if I'm understanding this conversation correctly, means that for us particularism is very, very important, because that means first and foremost looking at ourselves, looking at the commandments we may be keeping, and figuring out, are we doing them absolutely correctly? It's tough. It's never easy. People often joke about if it was a Torah obligation to have a Christmas tree, how many details would come with it, especially inside the Orthodox movement. When can you bring it inside the house? When do you take it out of the house? How tall does it have to be? When do you hang the ornaments up? After sundown, before sundown. And for us, it's kind of like, to an outsider, it often looks strange. But to us, the details do matter, because if you're not keeping, or at least looking into the specifics of exactly what it is that as an individual we're supposed to be doing, you could just be missing the boat. You could be doing it incorrectly. So that's the first and foremost, but we don't view it as a contradiction to universalism, which is the fact that we have to be a force for the better, a force for the good, make a kiddush Hashem, sanctify God's name on this world. And that's ultimately our job over here, to start within ourselves, to start with the specifics, and by extension be a force for the good on a much larger scale.
Thanks. By the way, I'm going to look at the camera because I got a critique last time that I was looking too much at the panelists and not the camera. So I'm looking at the camera. Hello to somebody who I'm sure is frantically typing now, and I start looking at the camera, but not being rude to you. So, listening to the three of you is interesting. You're all on the same wavelength of what you take the terms to be, but I'd like to push a little bit harder on the notion of particularism, and particularly with regard to what I mentioned earlier, this notion of chosenness, right? This idea of, very, very, as by way of introduction, very famously, the Reconstructionist movement, which is not represented here, abandoned chosenness because its founder stated that chosenness is inherently an idea of being better. It's not just being special in our own way and you're special in your way, but rather we're special in a special way that you're not, that we're better. And so Reconstructionism very famously abandoned that. Your movements have not, to my knowledge, none of the movements have, to my knowledge. And I wonder how you deal with that critique, that to say, we are chosen, we are the children of God, we are special in a way that nobody else on planet Earth is. And there are some texts that really emphasize that quite strongly. I mean, you mentioned Arthur Green. It's true. He's obviously a universalist, but the irony, of course, is that he's dedicated his life to Kabbalah, to Jewish mysticism, which is the most Judeo-centric division of all of Torah. The most committed to the idea that the only human beings that matter on earth are Jews, and everything else in the entire universe is just about Jews. And he's an expert on that, and yet he's a universalist. And his life's mission, as you know, and maybe some of you know, has been to blend those somehow, to bring the Kabbalah, to bring Jewish mysticism to a universal egalitarian, mindset. So it's a perfect transition that you mentioned him, and I wonder how you deal with that. And if you are okay with the fact that that your movement has not abandoned this notion of being especially special. And everyone's special, but some are more special than others.
So, because I brought him up, right? So what I said to, and it's not about Arthur Green, but it's going to be about Arthur Green, right? What I said to him was, when we were talking about chosenness specifically, was that of course I believe the Jewish people are a chosen people. I also hope that my Lutheran pastor neighbor believes the same thing about his own religion. I don't believe it about his religion, but I hope he does, because if he doesn't believe that what they're doing is his best path to God or to spiritual fulfillment, then he shouldn't be in the role that he's in. Now, I'm not saying that means that I'm chosen and he's chosen and they're chosen and everyone is chosen, but I hope that the faith leaders and the people who adhere to any particular religion have the confidence and the pride that what they believe is unique and different than everyone else. There's the particularism coming back in. And in that sense, I very much believe that the Jewish people are the chosen people, and that our way, I believe, provides the best path to, or the correct path to live a more moral, spiritual, ethical life of Torah and God.
I don't believe that, and I don't think that my movement does. I don't believe we've jettisoned the idea of chosenness, but I certainly don't think we believe we're the chosenest, whatever you put it before. I do think that ours is
Copyright Shane's 2020.
The choosiness, was that the next word, the chosenness? I think we do, for the most part, believe that everyone is chosen, truly, that everyone is, and even actually in our liturgy, so where chosenness comes through the most in the liturgy is in the words of Aleinu, who was chosen and set us apart, different from everyone else. We have an alternative version of the Aleinu in our prayer book that takes the second paragraph and bumps it up to the first. And that is the version that we do at KKBE. It removes the line about chosenness. It's still there in our book, and it still can be done, and it still is done in many Reformed congregations. We made that, I think I inherited that decision at KKBE, I could be wrong, but I know we made that decision very intentionally in a previous congregation that I served. It was a very small congregation in the Midwest. And I remember having a conversation with some of my leaders there when we hosted what was a visitor's Shabbat, a teeny tiny congregation. Anytime a church group would be visiting, they were at risk of being overwhelmed by the number of non-Jews at their Jewish service. So they designated one night a year that they opened up and advertised to all the churches in town, and we spent the evening worshiping, but also educating as we went through the service. And I remember their concern about saying the version of the Aleinu that has that line about chosenness in it without the opportunity to explain it to everyone who was there. But we could explain it because it was that kind of a service. But then we reflected upon those who would be visiting us throughout the rest of the year without the opportunity to explain it, and we didn't feel comfortable with it. If we could engage in the conversation about what it means to us to be chosen, which probably, if you were to ask most people in the Reform movement, it means that we have been chosen, of anything, to be universalist minded, to be out in the world, making the world a better place for everyone. And that hopefully everyone's religion is helping them to be doing that. And so you find your way to a religion that, yes, you feel like it's chosen for me. It's the best path for me. And for those who also choose it for themselves, or born into it and actively choose it every day of their lives, I lead them in their path, absolutely. But in doing so, I'm in no way saying that it's right for everyone else, or what everyone else believes is wrong vis-a-vis me. And there's actually a line from Heschel, which I'm gonna misquote, but something about how we have to have loyalty to our own faith, but reverence for all others. Reverence, not just respect, but reverence for all others. And to the extent that my partners in all other religious traditions are out there doing the work that I'm doing side by side, I do revere their tradition that leads them to do that work. Did I answer all parts of that question?
It was a lot, thank you.
Okay.
I think there are some
mean,
differences between us, but not as much as you think of the agreeing and disagreeing. So I both agree and disagree with you.
I'm just have your joke coming, but
Yeah, so for us, we do absolutely believe that we are chosen, but we also absolutely believe that we're not better. These things are, I think it's pretty easy to prove that they're not mutually, they are mutually exclusive, they're not the same. I'll prove it. For example, inside of Judaism, we have a concept of priests and Levites, Kohanim and Levim, and they are Jews like we're Jews, and they're not better. We actually have laws the way we have to treat priests. We call them up first to the Torah and things like that. That doesn't mean they're better. I think a good analogy would be, what we call it, public servants. I think that's a really good way to term people that are either elected or, work their way up in police and fire department. They may have the jurisdiction to be able to barge into my house. They're chosen in that way, but they're certainly not better than me. In fact, they're public servants, right? So I think that's the way that our movement views being chosen, that absolutely we are chosen. It's unequivocal for us, but we're not better. On the contrary, it comes with more responsibilities. It comes with a whole big book of rules. It comes with the commandments of how to act, where we go, what we do, an entire lifestyle. Doesn't mean we're better, just means we have more obligations. So I think that the analogy of public servants is what I would keep in mind when I talk about, or when you hear people talk about being chosen. It's not a superiority thing. Genuinely not. If anything, it's more obligations, more responsibility. It's a more difficult lifestyle, but it is an opportunity to live life in a more spiritual way.
And just to share, just for those who might not know, and to draw out the contrast even further, so Reform Judaism is an egalitarian movement that we usually think of as being gender egalitarianism, but we've actually eliminated the status of Kohen and Levite in our congregation as well, and believe that everyone has equal access to and equal responsibility within the community.
Interesting. For those who don't know at home, if you don't mind me explaining, so the ancient priests and Levites from the temple, obviously that's been going for a long time. My students know that already from the last midterm. But there are people who trace their lineage to being priests or being Levites, and outside of the Reform movement, they still get certain roles and rituals that others don't get. I'm glad you mentioned Aleinu. By the way, we're going to have questions in just a few minutes. I'm going to open it to the floor, especially to students, but also to community members and anyone at home. I have my phone for a reason. It's not to to check Facebook. It is to find questions being typed in to is it a chat box, Kim? To the chat box. So if those at home want to ask questions, please do, and it will come to my phone. You mentioned Aleinu. The Aleinu, traditionally, not the changed one that you talked about, has two paragraphs. The first paragraph talks about yea, us being Jews, and we're not like the people of the earth. We're awesome because we're part of this covenant with God. And the second one is a universal one. We can't wait till everyone's part of this, but it's a universalism that we can't wait till everyone joins us worshiping the one God. It's not a universalism that we can't wait till we're all just peaceful. It's we can't wait till everyone else stops worshiping idols. They're not going to be Jewish, but they'll at least be worshiping God. So it's a kind of interesting universalism. But there are other texts that are.
You should throw in, sorry to interrupt, you should also throw in that it's really three versions of Aleinu, because we eliminate one line after the Vanachnu Korma, after the bow. There's that one line in there that talks about all other gods being hevel, being dust and nothing, and that line has come out of our liturgy. I don't know.
It was cut because of Christian censorship. Some versions, some Jews, after they escaped Christian censorship, put it back, and some didn't. Right. There's a line in the first paragraph, which is about specialness and chosenness, that's particularly, I guess the word is problematic. I think that's the academic word, is problematic. But there are other texts out there that are useful or problematic to you, I'm imagining. I'm thinking about books of the prophets. I'm thinking about the book of Joshua, which is about conquering and genocide and pretty rough things. I'm thinking about laws in the Talmud that really differentiate between Jews and non-Jews in ways that Orthodox Jews struggle with sometimes. Right? For example, off the top of my head, whether or not you can break the Sabbath to save the life of a non-Jew, which nowadays rabbis will say, yes, you should, but it's not so clear-cut. They had to figure out why, which is an issue because of when the Talmud was written. Law develops, but still it's a text. So I'm wondering if there are texts that you find particularly helpful in negotiating this issue, and texts that you find problematic or troubling that you've been struggling to overcome.
So I'll throw out, and I'm sure as my colleagues share others, I'll say, oh yes, that one too, and that one too. The first one that comes to mind for me is the concept of B'Tselem Elohim that we get right away in Genesis, that everyone is created in the image of God. And as we read a text of the Torah, the text of the Hebrew Bible, the rabbinic texts that follow, and we recognize that there are all kinds of inconsistencies, and Reform recognizes that reforming with a lowercase r has been happening throughout the ages that Judaism has existed, and we continue that process. Part of what we use to help us navigate those distinctions is if there's a place that isn't treating everyone as though they are equal on the same plane in the image of God, loved by God, capable as everyone around them, then that's a text that needs to be evaluated against that concept that we believe to be one of the enduring principles of our tradition.
You can also pass, by the way, you don't have to answer any people's questions. Please, Rabbi.
No, I just talk about that sentence in Alenu that was taken out by the Christian censors, and then afterwards it was put in. They didn't only take that out, they took different passages from the Talmud out, which spoke about Jesus and things like that in a negative light. But they took out this line which says that, you know, other nations bow down to nothingness and emptiness. It's come back into many Orthodox communities. Again, it's not viewing lightly of other people. It doesn't mean that anybody is any less of a person than we are. But we fundamentally believe in different roles for different people. Not better or worse, just different roles. Not everybody is created identical. Everybody has their own struggles, their own challenges, their own background, their own work to do in life. So there's a concept in Hebrew called, for example, Chasidei Umas Ha'olam, which is, pious people, pious Gentiles who have gone out of the way. They've been recognized in places like Yad Vashem for, these are extreme examples, but for saving the lives of thousands of Jews during the Holocaust, many different examples. But that doesn't have to be the case. But anybody who's just living a just and proper life in their circumstance, we don't go out asking everybody to be Jewish. On the contrary, but it's if people are living their life, which they were given in a just and proper way, that is absolutely them doing the best, and they're 100% equal. So again, being chosen doesn't mean being better. We just believe in different roles. I'll just give you one last example. It would be, let's say, there's an obligation in the Torah to respect one's father and mother. So let's say an example is that to stand up when they come in the room. That doesn't mean they're better than I am, but it does mean that I have to show them respect, because the role that they're in is a role that I have to be submissive to them. And it goes on throughout generations. So I think fundamentally we believe that there has to be different roles for different people, different roles for different nations, and even different roles for different religions. But that doesn't mean that we are all 100% equal and always will be. But we certainly are not better than anybody else and don't claim to be.
Thank you.
So one of the classes that I teach on a weekly basis is a Talmud class, and the last couple of months we've been studying the first chapter of the tractate of Avodah Zarah, of idol worship. It's classically seen as one of the latest tractates of the Talmud, like it's edited as late as you can go with the Talmud, and it's one of those that when it was edited, they knew the censors were reading it, and it's one of those tractates that, as Rabbi Mimran was talking about, where there are a number of paragraphs that specifically mention, Jesus of Nazareth that they took out, and there's a new-ish volume of Talmud, the Koren. The Steinsaltz, thank you. The Koren Steinsaltz edition, and they put those paragraphs back in to the text so that you can see what was actually edited out at a certain point. And in part, what we've been using this first chapter to do in the class is to look at what gave the ancient rabbis anxiety. Right, when it comes to assimilation, when it comes to this idea of how do you live in the diaspora, how do you live in a time when the temple has not been rebuilt for a few hundred years by that point, right, 500-600 years, where it doesn't look exactly like it's going to be rebuilt, where we're living in Babylonia, where we're really happy in Babylonia and we're flourishing there, and what does it look like? How do we relate to our non-Jewish neighbors? And it's just been fascinating to see what gives them anxiety, right? Can you start making your stew and walk away if your non-Jewish neighbor is sitting there, right? Maybe they'll slip in some non-kosher meat, right? And laugh at you that you're eating non-kosher food, right? Then the rabbis come to their senses and they say, nah, it's not worth the money for them to do that with their meat and then not eat it, so we can trust they wouldn't actually do that because it's not worth it, financially, it's not worth it for them to do it. And just so I've come to appreciate that text. We're studying it, but I've come to appreciate in the last few months of how the rabbis struggled with many of these questions, all the way back to the beginning of 2 millennia ago of this, and they want to live out in the world. They want to be able to do business and engage with their non-Jewish neighbors, but they also want to make sure that we maintain a distinct identity, that particular identity of Judaism, and not allow assimilation to overcome those particular details of what we believe or how we practice ritual.
That's great, thank you. I think it's come to the point where we should ask the audience for some questions. Do we have a microphone? Here is a roaming microphone. And I think we have our first, and we have a question here in the front, but just students should know, I'm going to be angling to give you the microphone. So if you have a question, you're going to get priority, so please think about it. But there's one right, is there a student right there? So if you don't mind, we'll have the student first, then we'll pass the microphone to you.
Okay. So you just talked about the Jewish culture within diaspora, which obviously relates very heavily to today's society, like Jewish culture in America or wherever you are. I feel like from my perspective seen as a minority. So and kind of relating that to chosenness, as we were talking about earlier, how would you relate that to conversion? Because if you're living in a society and you agree that your culture is better or your ethnic religion is better, do you believe in conversion in the idea that you want more Jewish people, but even if you're chosen, do you understand what I'm saying?
It's a great question, thank you. Yes, the question is about conversion, why you would want converts, why you might want more converts, whether you should or should not look for converts based on this discussion.
More Jews are always a good thing. Do I go out searching for people and ask? No, I'm not. I don't proselytize like that. But when someone walks into my office and says I'm interested in conversion, I'm excited for it. Right, I look forward to work with them. It's great for me. I get to study, at least for an hour a week with those students. Get to hear their questions, and they often have me thinking more on my toes or in deeper ways about religion because they're coming to Judaism from a different perspective with different thoughts. And naturally they're comparing and contrasting that they have this pull, right? Their soul is pulling them towards Judaism, and it becomes helping them figure out how do those particular details, the particular details of Judaism speak to them in a stronger way than the way that they were brought up, right? That's why they walked into my office, because they felt that pull innately, right? From that whatever religion they were didn't speak to them. It wasn't for them, and this is. So I love it, and I try to encourage them along their path. I also had students that have studied with me for 6 months, 8 months, and then ghosted me. Yeah, it happens, and it's a good thing that happens, right? Because if they're not committed, and the details of Judaism don't speak to them, then they shouldn't be in that class. It's sad for me when they don't, but but on the other hand, I love it when someone walks into my office. I love it when we complete the conversion process, and I look forward to the next student walking into my office to begin the process.
So we were talking before the program began about how many people have been seeking us out to explore conversion as of late, and it is an exciting thing. you feel chosen. I must be a part of something that's doing something right if people are seeking us out. And I will tell you right now, and we're in between Intro to Judaism classes at KKBE. We offer them every other year. So those who come to us now, we send them to online classes that the Union for Reform Judaism does, and we meet with individuals individually as that's happening. I have 10 people meeting with me now. That's since our last class wrapped up this past summer. It's been really exciting. You may have heard that traditionally, those who are interested in converting to Judaism are turned away 3 times, and I always love the moment when somebody comes into my office and says, "Are you going to do that?" And I say, "I'm not," but I do take away from that the idea that an individual who's exploring conversion and formalizing conversion, because you can be on a Jewish journey without undertaking conversion, certainly, and our doors are open to everyone in that sense. But if you're interested in exploring conversion, you have to own that journey. And so my interpretation of turning someone away 3 times is that we're going to meet at least 3 times and not schedule the next appointment at those meetings. The ball will be in the individual's court to reach out to me and schedule the next appointment. And as opposed to those who come, I know if we have a next appointment, they're going to show up because they're responsible people who aren't going to ghost me. And I want to give them that opportunity to pursue a different path if that's what comes. But to tie in the conversion piece really directly with the Universalist piece, there was this quote that really spoke to me by a colleague of mine who is recently retired, Rabbi Lance Sussman. He has a whole passage here on how we overcorrected perhaps in Reform Judaism by reclaiming too much of particularism at the expense of a universalistic calling to be out in the world trying to make it a better place for everyone. And he puts this exact question out there. Do converts need to undergo 16 weeks of Judaization, which is not an entire process, it's just the formal course process of conversion, but 16 weeks of Judaization and Jewish socialization, or do they need to embrace one basic commitment to help make the world a better place through Judaism? I think I'm going to be asking that of those who come to see me, and certainly when I'm sitting on a Beit Din, how that plays into their Jewish future.
I'll answer just quickly. So for us, we also don't seek out converts. We don't necessarily know where the number 3 comes from to turn them away, but the process is a long and difficult one. And normally by the end of it, somebody who's come through the entire process is very, very committed. But because we believe there is a distinction between Jews and non-Jews, and that with being Jewish comes more obligation, we fundamentally need to make sure that somebody who does want to become Jewish is going to, actually practice Judaism. That's what we'll say it. Because otherwise, you're going to convert somebody to be Jewish, but they're not actually going to act Jewish. They're just going to kind of use the title, is the way that we would look at it. So for that reason, it's viewed as much harder to convert with an Orthodox Jewish conversion. It is, for the simple reason that somebody who, the Talmud actually says that, somebody who wants to become a convert has to take upon themselves every single one of the commandments, where somebody who is Jewish remains Jewish forever. Why is it that way? Because somebody who wants to come inside of the fold has to be able to commit, to be able to be practicing and observing and keeping everything according to our tradition. Because if not, we're just converting somebody who so to speak will just be a sinner, or won't keep the obligations, and that is not viewed as a good thing at all. So yeah, that's it.
Reminds me of the Seinfeld episode where he was angry with the dentist who converted just for the jokes. Herb.
You referred to humanism as all humans are made in God's image, but that's not what humanism is. There's a national movement of humanism of people who are good without any gods, and that includes many Jews. For instance, the Society for Humanistic Judaism has a national organization, has atheist rabbis, and they have congregations in lots of cities. So be careful when you define what you think is humanism.
Thank you for that important introduction. Do you all want to respond, or thank you, Herb, thank you. Other questions, please.
So here at Hillel, we have a Texani club called Havara, and about a year ago, we were actually having a conversation about charity in Tikkun Olam and the role that plays in particularism and universalism, and when communities Jewish communities should prioritize themselves and when they should prioritize other communities. So I guess how do all of y'all think about tzedakah and tikkun olam?
Thank you. Why don't you go first? You've been going last the whole time.
Yeah, so I mean, tzedakah is a mitzvah in the Torah. It's one of the 613 commandments to help out somebody in need. Tikkun olam is a much more vaguer and realistically more modern invention. I believe in 1941 it was popularized by, or the terminology tikkun olam was popularized by somebody by the name of Shlomo Mimran. But I mean, it does appear in many verses, including in the Aleinu prayer, which we've mentioned so many times tonight. So it's definitely something important, but it's for orthodoxy it's just kind of very, very vague. So it can be used in any sort of realm. But again, coming back to my original point, we kind of first and foremost focus on what does it say inside the text? What is the original obligations? What is the 613 commandments? We kind of view them, we always say, the 10 commandments weren't given as multiple choice. And the truth is that applies to the entire Torah. We didn't get a choice of, take this, leave that. So that's, what we look at. So for example, you bring charity, that's in there. Tikkun olam is very vague. I mean, it's a fantastic thing. And that is the idea of, I think, universalism, else being out there, being a light upon the nations, sanctifying God's name. But it's very hard to define. So there's a lot that goes inside of it. And it is relatively a modern kind of thing, which I think their movements will have a lot more to connect with.
Yeah, I mean, we have a Tikkun Olam committee. We do a lot of that work at Emanu-El, and we partnered with a lot of local organizations to better the Charleston community. And every so often, particularly around the holidays, we choose Jewish-specific causes to engage with. That's what the Tikkun Olam of going out into the community to make the world a better place to help. When it comes to tzedakah, as Rabbi Mimran said, it's a good thing, right? To give tzedakah is a good thing. One of the things that I like to do to make sure that we do at different points of the year give to Jewish causes as well as universal causes, particularly around holidays. So for instance, Purim is coming up in 2 weeks, right? So one of the mitzvot, one of the commandments of Purim is matarot le'evyonim, right? Giving gifts to those in need. So we run a food drive, and we split it up between the Kosher Food Pantry and James Island Outreach. Or if we're going to if we're going to collect donations, right, we'll split it between a Jewish charity, Mazon, right, which helps feed the hungry, versus something local as well, so that we're helping both. We'll do something similar again around Passover. When we sell our chametz, right? We raise money through that. Again, money goes to two different causes. One rooted in the Jewish world and one rooted in our local community to try and keep a foot in both of those. But the core, the reason we're doing any of it is the particular values that they hold within Judaism, even if they are universally good things.
So I'll say that, let me say a bit. All tzedakah good, all tikkun olam good, and actually, I did some research on the phrase tikkun olam, and it's in the context of mipnei tikkun olam, which appears multiple times in the Mishnah, and is almost always referring to a marginalized population or individual that is at risk of being further marginalized, and the law is changed in that moment to be able to take this person who's at risk and bring them back into the fold. It changes throughout the iterations and through Aleinu and everything else, but its earliest iterations are there. But all good, and with limited resources, whether that's time or money or whatever it might be, whatever we can do, whatever we're compelled to do, good. When as an individual we're weighing with our own limited resources, what is it that we do? It's a hard question, maybe an impossible question. Some of our texts can guide us. I don't know that there's a universal answer for every moment about which is better. But I will say that in this particular moment, 2023, the United States and the world as it is right now, generally speaking, I believe, I'm not speaking on behalf of my movement or my congregation right now, I believe that the universalist cause best serves the particular cause. And I'll give you one example where I know, and this again, this is me, not my congregation, I know I'm in a different place than my colleagues up here. There is a bill right now that's before our state legislature about adopting a certain definition of anti-Semitism. We're all concerned about anti-Semitism, and rightfully so. I may differ about which definition is best to adopt, but that's actually not my issue here. My issue is about focusing on this particular concern of hatred directed toward one group and divorcing it from work that we are also doing as part of a Jewish community with the LGBTQ community and the African American community to try and get a hate crime bill passed in this state, which would affect all of us. And understanding that white supremacy targets all of these minority, at-risk, marginalized populations, and by singling out one concern with a piece of legislation that honestly doesn't have a lot of teeth to it and isn't going to do very much, we're jeopardizing the universalist cause, which will help us particularly well by being a part of that cohort that is committed to staying together. So I think you have to weigh it in every single situation.
Thank you so much. Other questions, please? Kim has, can you pass it back? First to the student right behind you, if you don't mind, and then back over.
Does each denomination value oral Torah from the Talmud as a complete extension of the Torah, or does one denomination or all hold the traditional texts from the Torah as they are read in the exact literal sense in more or complete importance than the Talmud?
So I'll go first. That most of my denomination understands both the written Torah and the oral Torah as being divinely inspired, but not to necessarily be taken as the literal word of God. I don't know that I can even need to make a distinction then between oral Torah and written Torah, because that applies to both.
Perfect.
No, we need the Talmud in order to understand the Torah, in order to be able to live life the way we do today. We need the Talmud.
Ditto, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, please.
So this question is for the more traditional rabbis in the group. Why was it okay to add to the liturgy during medieval times, during time 1300s, 1400s? Most of our liturgy, as we pray today, comes from that era. And then it got frozen in medieval Europe, Dark Ages, and we can't change it. So why the Reform movement looked down upon for modernizing the liturgy, while if you look at the first Siddur by in the 9th century, it's about 3 pages. I mean, which is very Reform-like.
I'm going to just reframe the question, if I may.
Oh, sure.
Just because to try to get it somewhat, you probably have the answer.
Oh, I was gonna say we're in Charleston, we just don't like change, so.
Yeah, there is something to that as well, yeah. You have to do it one board at a time, you never notice the difference. So it's a very big question, a very fundamental and very good question, although I would, as an author of a book in Orthodoxy, I would argue that I don't think anyone is more or less traditional, but everyone claims to be more traditional, and probably nobody is, but that's just a different discussion. But I would say the question could be, what is your view, based on his question, of the legacy of texts that are binding us that we may find troubling in this regard, right? Whatever that text may be, whether it's a Siddur passage from Aleinu that got cut out, that we want to specifically go out of the way to put back when it's so troubling, or a Talmudic passage, or a biblical passage for that matter. If I may sort of spin your question into the topic, you can address that in that regard.
So I think it's come at it from a couple different ways, right? First is we see this even something like Torah Shabbat Peh, the oral Torah, right? It was written down and it was frozen, right? It wasn't frozen, it was edited, right? We know that pieces of the Mishnah were left out. They become brightot in the Talmud, right? They get put back in because they were cut out, they were left out. Only certain stuff can go in. So I don't think so much that it was intentionally frozen. It was that as people became more literate, as we standardized our prayers, those things got written down, and that caused it to be frozen, as you said. I don't, but I'll take umbrage with the idea that at least from my own movement, that we look down on the Reform movement for changing the liturgy. That's not where we disagree with them. It's
down on for other things.
Well put.
You walked right into that.
That's not what we do. It's a theological difference, right? Some of the changes that the Reform movement has made in the Amidah with those changes are not that it's we updated the Amidah too. We added in the Imaot, right? The matriarchs into the Amidah, but we still believe in that messianic cause of saying Mechayeh HaMetim, right? Who gives life to the dead, whereas I think the Reform changed to Mechayeh HaKol, right? Who gives life to all.
Yes, and the last iteration of our prayer book put it in with a slash with both options.
With both options, right? So it's even so, right? All the more so, it's a theological difference, not they changed something and we don't like it. That's where it is. So I think the text can be updated, right? I mean, we've seen updates to it. We've made other changes to the text. We've eliminated, the prayers thanking God for not making me a woman or not making me a non-Jewish person. We've reframed those in the positive. The going more traditional or classic, as you say, right? The Amidah, right, is called the Shmona Esrei in every classical text, right? The 18, because there's 18 blessings. Guess how many blessings there are actually in it? Guess. Someone, no one? Guess a number, any number.
7.
Good guess, no, 19, right? The prayer that is called 18, it really has 19 blessings because we added one and they just didn't change the name. I think it can be updated.
So just to back up to the text of the Shemona Esrei, the text of the original Amidah was written over 2,300-400 years ago by what we call the Anshe Knesset Gdola, the men of the Great Assembly. It's coming up to the Purim story now. Mordechai, one of the heroes in the story, was a member of this Great Assembly. And, we view these as prophets, giants, so we absolutely view that as codified, and we would never touch it or change it on purpose by any stretch. Even that extra blessing that was added in the 19th blessing was only added in about 200-300 years later after the destruction of the Second Temple, but it was also by one of the Tanakh era writers, by Shimon. So, and even the later texts, you talk about, more was added in, it used to be shorter. Yes, originally it was just the 18 blessings in Amidah, again, 2,300-400 years old around. But then afterwards, what was added in wasn't what I'll call made up text. It was the vast majority of it. We look at the beginning of the prayers, which is Psukkah de Zimra, is all just text from Tehillim, from Psalms, from King David, again, ancient. And this was also done, by holy sages that did this with not just superficially. This is what's in fashion in the times. They did this with visible intent. Most likely they saw a spiritual decline within the Jews after they left Israel, and therefore there needs to be more time to pray, more time to connect, more time to praise God. That's why they put in these parts of Psalms. So yeah, we definitely view this as unchangeable. We view this as something that we will never get our head around. I give a prayer study class, and we go, we do one blessing every few weeks. That's how slowly we're going, not even scratching the surface of the smallest depths of what is behind the intentions that when this was written back then. But no, we don't view this as changeable. We certainly don't look down on anybody, just to put that out there as well. But in our tradition, we view this as unchangeable, and we're very proud of the fact that we have stuck with it and will do. That is our tradition, and that is how we connect to God.
Thank you. I'm going to open the floor again just 1 second, but I want to clarify because you said something and I forgot. I meant to ask you. So the conservative movement there's 3 blessings famously in the morning blessings. One for thanking God for not making me a slave, one for not making me a non-Jew, and one for not making me a woman. Which we said that men, obviously. The conservative movement has cut or refashioned those 3 blessings.
So Matir Asurim, who frees the chained, is still in there.
Shalos ani Abed.
It's gone.
That's gone. And Shalos that didn't make me a slave is gone. Shalos ani Isha is gone. Didn't make me a woman. And Shalos ani Goy, I think, yeah.
Correct. They've reframed it in the positive. So it's Shasani Ben Chorin, or Ban Chorin, who's made me a free person, who has made me in God's image, and made me a Israel, Shasani Israel.
For us, it's who's made me a Jew.
Right.
So you made it as a positive, it made me a Jew.
Right.
So it's still there, the sense of particularism, but framed as a positive rather than a negative. Very interesting, thank you. Thanks for that. Please, we have time for a couple more? Yeah, please. One or two more. All right.
Sorry. I want to go back to the concept of chosenness. As a child, I was very impressed by the mythological magic of being chosen. And then, because of my life experience, I turned a little more in the other direction. My question is, like your rabbi said, that the Orthodox understand being chosen not because you are better, but because you get more obligations. So if I get the option to choose, I tend to choose the better one because it's an option. But if God chose the Jews to give them more obligations to become better, question mark, first question. And then you said, by fulfilling that in the personal, you said by extension, it becomes universalist. My question is, how?
So to address it. So about the chosenness not being better situation, but that is exactly it for us. That we believe that because we're chosen, we have more responsibility. For example, an elected official that may have a larger platform, a larger influence, or whatever, maybe even just somebody with a larger social media presence, has a big obligation. It doesn't make them better than anybody else. This is why we don't necessarily seek out converts. If somebody comes to me and says to me, Rabbi, I'm not Jewish, should I be Jewish? Is that the right thing to do? Wait, no. For you, it's not necessarily. It's not that you'll be better if you're Jewish. You'll just have more obligations. You'll just have more responsibility. We view that as a reality. Again, doesn't mean we're better. We're just chosen. We're just different. And we fundamentally believe that across everything. So people have different roles. People have different jobs, different circumstances, and everybody is supposed to do the best they can in that scenario. Just coming very quickly to your second question, we do believe that if the Torah mitzvahs are kept correctly, then there's a net positive to the entire world, be that through giving charity, through being sanctifying God's name, for being a good example, for being generous, for being kind, for being hospitable. All of those things have a net gain for the entire world.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one last question, if there is any. Okay, well, it's past 8:30, so anyone who is shyer and would like to come up afterwards, I'm sure we can handle it. I'm thinking about the end of Pirkei Avot, of Mishnah Avot, the ethics of the fathers. Each chapter of which, the chapters themselves often talk about wonderful humanist ethics, but each chapter is attached to it the line, that every Jew has a portion of the world to come, which then later Jewish texts grapple with. What do you mean only the Jews? They say, no, if non-Jews do good things, they'll also have a portion, and so on. It's a whole back and forth. So we could go on for hours. You can see why I chose the topic.
Check out the opening midrash in Avodah Zarah, chapter 1. It's all there.
It suggests there, yeah. Right. And so the answer, I think, is now go and learn. I think is, as Hillel famously said, now go and learn. Thank you so much, as always, for coming, and thank you all to the audience for coming. And we look forward to the next conversation.
Thank you.